When it rains in Iraq, mud clings to everything. It sucks boots off feet, it bonds to the fabric of pants, and it fills the wheel wells of HMMWVs, responding to indirect fire so they stop rolling. Insurgent mud, mud that makes the air smell like a pottery room full of unfired sculpture, the kiln a few months away. Yesterday, right after the big storm, Sarkist convinced some of the fishing commandos to give him a small live fish, caught with a net, not the grenade, which he added to the giant lake by the front door of our compound. Schwab and I sit under the canopy and watch the fish swim around in 7 or 8 inches of water. You could give it to the source when it dies, I say. I wonder what that would get you. Herpes, probably, Schwab says. A fish in the puddle is worth 2 in the sea, 'cause it can't get away. It's a doggy proverb. Cartography by Kate Schifani. Who's gonna love it? So if you're interested in an on-the-ground perspective of the late American occupation of Iraq with a keen eye for absurdity, then you're going to love this book. It's a nonfiction book. It's a whirlwind of humor, pain, ridiculousness that is too strange for fiction. Everything from a forklift that only turns left, Navy SEALs who don't wear pants, to Iraqi soldiers that are cooling off by bathing in a tank used for potable water. The layers of strangeness and humor are compounded by the author's perspective as both a woman and a lesbian during the Army's don't ask, don't tell policy. If you like the idea of a non-fiction catch-22, then you are going to love this book. Part 2, who's going to hate it? This memoir doesn't have a traditional story arc. If there's meaning to be found in the chaos, it is left to the reader to find that meaning. The writing can be disorienting at times. It jumps back and forth between contrasting images. Characters talk over each other. They talk past each other, which is no doubt an accurate representation of how events were. There's a lot of really fun and chaotic scenes, but it can be just confusing for the reader, and that may not be of interest to you. If you're hoping for any sort of direct judgment or even just interpretation from the perspective character, you're not going to find it here. Most of the time, the author's opinion is absent. She's sort of a stoic camera that's observing events from afar. The events, however, are the thing. It is this circus of inept, immature, friendly, corrupt, well-meaning, sleazy, lazy, resourceful, and arrogant characters. If it's hard for you to read about ineptitude, waste, bureaucracy, inflexibility, locker room humor, and some cruelty, then you might not like this book. Lastly, a serious warning. Although the topics are handled very maturely, I thought, and quite briefly, honestly, there is a limited amount of sex, violence, suicide, and sexual assault. Part 3, what I thought of it. I loved it. I think it's fantastic. So Three Kings is one of my favorite movies, and I think there's a really appropriate comparison to be made between Cartography and Three Kings, and not just because they're both about American military presence in Iraq.
Are we shooting?
What?
Are we shooting people or what?
Are we shooting?
That's what I'm asking you!
What's the answer?
I don't know the answer, that's what I'm trying to find out!
I can see a grain of sand in there and just can't get it out.
That movie is a roller coaster of highs and lows, of hilarious scenes mixed with really tragic moments and a lot of drama as well. And it does this amazing balancing act of presenting all of that to you in a very genuine and sincere way. And this novel does the same thing. This memoir, does the same thing. I tried to read Catch-22 a number of years ago, and I only got halfway through it. I felt like it got very repetitive, and I sort of understood the joke, and I was ready to move on. But each chapter in Cartography acts as a somewhat self-contained short story, and they each feel fresh and strange in their own way. Cartography is funny. There are very few direct jokes, but there's a lot of fun callbacks that bring the reader into the inner circle of these inside jokes. In a lot of ways, it's a situational comedy in a war zone. And as I say that, I feel like I have to bring up the TV show MASH, and of course the movie as well. But those aren't really my generation, but I suspect that if you really love MASH, then you will also love this book. Cartography could have sunk in the ocean of its sad and violent and stupid setting, but the humor keeps it afloat. We pass a Navy 03. Did you see her name, I ask. Nope, didn't bother, says Schwab. That was Captain Downer, I say, and think to myself, I hope she gets promoted to major soon. She's in the Navy, Schwab says. Wouldn't that make her a lieutenant or something? Major Downer. You get it, Ashaya? You get it?
I get it, but I'm not laughing.
Part 4. What can writers learn from cartography? I think the most powerful lesson that writers can learn from cartography is the power of just the right details in the right place. And this is really what people are talking about when they say, show, don't tell. So let me give you just a few snippets here. Jim smiles, tells me about his previous job in Dubai, explains the stacks of money he has, shows me a new, simulated, Rolex he has purchased, and eats another samoon, chewing with his mouth open. We mention again our strategy, and in the middle of my discussion of cooperative support agreements, Jim turns his back to me and asks the general, "What happened to the fish they used to serve here?" Frank, Jim's interpreter, turns to the general. Frank is American, but was in Iraq visiting family when the first bombs fell, and after a few phone calls to the Pentagon, stayed on for the invasion. He relays Jim's question to the general, waits for a response, and says, "The fish on Monday?" "Yeah," says Jim. "There used to be this delicious fish here. What happened?" Sarkis leans in and says to me, "That fish was terrible, like frozen fish sticks." "The soldiers got tired of fish," the general says. "And since they're a democracy now," Frank interprets, "they voted fish out of Monday." And the general grabs his stomach and laughs as small amounts of rice and lentils spray from his mouth. Some catch in his mustache, some land on Jim and Frank. The author could have just said that Jim and the general are rude buffoons. They're uninterested in the day-to-day minutia that is vital to their mission in Iraq, the reason they're supposed to be there and making lives better for the Iraqi people. They want to know when the good fish sticks are coming back. So instead of just telling the reader directly, these guys were a bunch of buffoons who really didn't care about the mission, it's shown to us. It's shown by the way they interrupt this serious conversation to talk about fish sticks. They chew with their mouths open, they laugh, and spit food everywhere. In conclusion, cartography is sharp and bold and funny and surprising and tragic. It's a short read that doesn't overstay its welcome, and I highly recommend it.